Abby Cohn.
I'm Zoe Green.
And I'm Ann Lozich.
We are all currently sophomores and we live together. This podcast episode is going to be about roommate conflict, and that works out very nicely because we are, in fact, roommates. Before we get into the major topics of this podcast, I kind of wanted to establish our history with roommates. So we are all currently sophomores, as stated. My freshman year, I lived with someone completely different. I went through the random roommate process and got matched with someone who has the same major as me. Zoe, Ann, if you guys want to talk about your history with roommates before we lived together.
Well, so Zoe and I, we were friends in high school, and then we found out we were going to the same school. And it was kind of like, well, are we going to room with each other? And we were like, no, we don't want that. So we both decided we'd go random. But funny story, Zoe, you want to tell us what happened?
So we went to go random, and then we got the email that our roommates have been selected. And wow, Ann's my roommate.
And I look at my email, oh, Zoe's my roommate. So, yeah.
Fun. And then I met them. I was like, maybe I'll live with them. Yeah, fun. So something else I wanted to say before we kind of get started. This podcast is intended for people who are like first years, who are kind of nervous about the roommate process. I know I was. And for people who currently have roommates, whether, by choice or not, who are currently going through conflict and kind of need something to guide them through it all. So the way that this is going to work is that we have three major topics. First topic is, what is roommate conflict? Second topic is, why does roommate conflict occur? And the third topic is, what can people do to handle conflict? Within each of those major topics, I have some research articles that I found that relate to it. And then as we go through the findings, we're just going to talk about them. If we have any questions, if you have any thoughts, opinions, stories, we're just going to kind of let it happen. Just let it roll. So yeah, let's get started.
Let's get to it.
Sounds good.
Okay. With our first major topic, what is roommate conflict? So the first article I want to talk about is called Managing Conflict in Shared Housing for Young Adults. It's by Vicki Clark, Keith Tuffin, and Natalie Boker. Fun. So in this article, they define conflict as perceived incompatible differences between people resulting from continuous inconsistencies and disagreements in opinions and interests. Long definition, but I think we all kind of have a general idea of what conflict is. They also define shared living. Shared living involves communal areas such as a lounge, a kitchen, a bathroom, with bedrooms remaining private. Obviously, in like dorm room situations, the bedrooms aren't private because both the beds are in the same space. So they found a couple of fun things. First thing is that their research suggests that household chores are the primary source of roommate and shared living conflicts. So something like cleaning the bathroom, doing dishes, making sure the space looks nice. Zoe, you seem to have something to say.
I'm just laughing.
You're just having a little giggle fest. I know I have had my fair share of conflict with household chores. Conflict. Yeah, I know I'm not necessarily like a super clean, like neat freak, but I know that my freshman year, there were definitely some issues with my roommate in regards to making the space look nice. And unfortunately, I didn't really have the confidence to kind of bring that up with my roommate or anybody else. So the space just kind of stayed what it was at, so that's kind of on fault of me. I know like Zoe and Anne were always like, hey, maybe you should bring it up with your roommate, and I was like, do it, and then I got like really scared about it. Do you guys have anything to say about that?
What, that the primary source of conflict stems around chores?
Yeah, like household chores.
I agree.
Yeah.
I can see that.
We're also gonna be living in a house together next year with 2 other lovely ladies, so there are definitely gonna be more chores there, especially with like the kitchen and doing dishes and stuff. Fun. Other results from the study. They found that a recurring complaint about roommates, like other people's roommates, was obsessiveness. And the reason for that is because no one willingly takes on the judgment of being dirty or lazy. So one response is to position others as overly or overly obsessive. And that downplays kind of your responsibility in the conflict. So it's like, if I were like this super messy roommate, I would like just say, oh, but my roommate just like is a neat freak.
She's a neat freak. She's a germaphobe. She's OCD.
Yeah. Which is interesting.
But between Anne and I would definitely be perceived as the neat freak.
Well, how does it go for the other way around? Like, say, like, you're the... Wait, no. Say the neat freak, the so-called neat freak, on, like, the complaining about the messy person. Is that just... Sorry.
No, it's okay. Anne may have just spilled her water.
Don't worry, it was my water bomb.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe like, yeah, the person who maybe just like space is more clean could totally be like, this person is a slob, no
one will fully recognize that, like, they're a slob or they're messy.
Right.
Like, because that's not who they see themselves as a person. So, like, being told that is, like, shocking because you're like, whoa, I never thought about this of myself.
Mm-hmm.
You think you're pretty, like, average, like, on the spectrum. So it's kind of like anybody that deviates from that, it's just different.
Yeah.
It's odd.
It should be shamed.
In the shame corner. Another result from the study, it kind of talks about like freeloading, how that's another complaint about roommates. That mainly just kind of focuses on inconsideration for sharing communal things like food, hot water, electricity, and household responsibilities. Obviously, we don't have to necessarily worry about electricity because we're in a dorm room, not an apartment. But
I feel like it would be different if we had to pay rent month by month or like a water bill or electricity bill, because like if you have to pay out of pocket for like water and electricity and you have a roommate that's constantly just leaving on lights everywhere, that can lead up to $100 or a few $100s a month extra that you don't have to spend.
Right. This article definitely kind of focused more on shared living spaces, so like apartments and stuff. But yeah, especially in like a small like dorm space and college students, like you don't want to hog everything,
I'm kind of thinking like, because we're getting a house next year, I'm thinking like groceries. How are we gonna do that? Because we do a good job now of like, okay, this is my stuff, I'm gonna put this over here.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe like we'll decide, okay, I'm gonna put this in the we share all this stuff drawer.
I bought this for you.
Yeah.
This is for us.
This is for us.
Yeah. So the last thing I wanted to talk about in this article were some of the consequences of conflict that they mentioned. These are just kind of about when you don't handle conflict properly. So one of the things is negative psychological implications. So obviously, unresolved conflict is going to impact your mental health in any regard. But especially when you're in that living space. I know I see my space right now as sort of a retreat, I guess. You know, when you're like you're going to classes, working on homework and stuff, you come back here and it's just kind of a place where I can relax and unwind. Just kind of vibe. But there have been some times my freshman year when I would come back to my dorm room feeling upset about the state of the room, and I wouldn't be able to relax or like get anything done. It wasn't a good space for me to be like productive. So
yeah, I agree with that as well. I think Anne and I have a pretty good system for how we handle clutter and conflict in our space. I have no issue being blunt with Anne. She's been my friend for like 6 years. I have no issue bringing up any concern with her. And also the way our room is laid out is wonderful because it gives her this little space by her closet to make as much mess as she would like, and I do not perceive that area of the room.
The void.
I feel bad sometimes. I have some clothes that need to be picked up, but
I don't perceive it. Okay. It's okay.
It's just not there.
It's not there. The corner does not exist.
Just for clarification purposes, the way that our space is set up is that Zoe and Anne's like bed and desks are in one room. I'm in a single room by myself, and we share a bathroom.
We're in 3M.
We're in 3M, just to establish that. Okay, moving on to the next article, still under the same major topic. This article is called Responding to Roommate Troubles, Reconsidering Informal Dyadic Control, and this is by Robert M. Emerson. So first they just kind of establish that troubles within roommate conflict begin with dissatisfaction, irritation, or discontent with some act or attitude on the part of another. This is actually the only thing I've written for this article, so I obviously got so much from it. Yeah, I think we kind of already talked about that.
I think it definitely goes back to the first article.
Yep.
A lot.
Yeah, there's not that much to say about that, considering it is one bullet point that I have. Moving on so swiftly to our next article, and the final article for this main topic. This is called From Matchmaker to Mediator, Shifting Trends in Roommate Relationships in an Era of Individualism, Diversity, Conflict, and Social Media. So this article, the main takeaway I got from it is why it's important to understand roommate conflict and why it should be significant for people. So the first thing that they establish is that it's an experience shared by a large number of current and former college students. Unless you're in that small majority that has a single dorm room in their freshman year or at any point. Commuter status too. Everyone's had a roommate. Whether you like him or not, you've had at least one.
You don't have to like them, you just have to live with them.
You gotta live with... No, you don't have to live with them, and we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Oh.
You don't have to. The next thing that they talk about, the on-campus roommate relationship has the potential to yield value-added outcomes related to student success. So this is interesting.
Can you explain that? Clearer.
Maybe I don't want to.
Conflict.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that my mind comes to is if you're living with someone that has the same major as you or is taking the same classes as you. I know in our experience, freshman year, we all lived in Bergstrom. So we were all with honors kids, and we all had at least one class that was just completely our grade and honors students. So that was nice just to establish those relationships and knowing that you have people to reach out to in your living space that are in the same class if you had any questions.
Oh, it was just super
Not them.
convenient too.
Yeah.
And I don't want to speak for Anne, but I'm going to try right now. I go to bed at like 10:30 every day, consistently. It's a pretty good bet that when 10 o'clock rolls around, I'm in bed getting ready to wind down. And we kind of talked about this before, that you don't think that you would have as good of a sleeping schedule as you do right now if it wasn't so consistent.
Like if you didn't go to bed so early. Well, because when that happens, when Zoe's like getting ready to go to bed, I get home kind of late usually. So maybe around like 10:30, 11, and I see Zoe's in bed, and I'm like, oh, maybe I should start getting ready for bed because I don't want to be up and about and like ruining her sleep, waking her up, disturbing her. I know, but that's always in the back of my mind, so it's nice.
Mm-hmm.
I think I got a good sleep schedule because of Zoe.
Nice. So the last point that they highlight is the roommate relationship is rife with unique challenges, such as sharing a space and negotiating personal attributes that could just as likely affect the paired students in negative ways. So obviously I've learned a lot from having like the freshman year living with someone that I quite frankly didn't really know too well. Kind of learned a little bit more about how to stand up for what I want/need in a space. Obviously learn, how to clean up after myself, how to take care of a space that I am sharing with another individual. That's kind of carried over into now, even though technically I'm in a single. Those kind of lessons I learned about living there, I've just kind of carried over into here, probably just by like habit. So,
kind of going off of that, the personal attributes are extremely important to me. Like there are certain areas in our room, like my bed. I will not let anyone go into my bed. that is my space. Like that is the one area that I know only I occupy.
Yeah.
Or like my closet. I mean, I don't care if you go into there, but
go into your closet.
I don't know why you want. My clothes are in there.
I'm gonna take a nap in Zoe's closet.
Just Gabby things.
Just me things. Yeah, that's another thing too, just setting up personal boundaries. Because when you live at home, you have your room, and that's just kind of an understood personal space.
This is your domain.
Right. But when you share a space, especially in a dorm room where your beds are in the same room, you kind of have to establish, like, okay, this is my desk, my bed, my space. Please don't mess with this. So, do you have anything to say, Anne? Okay.
No, I think we hit it on the nose pretty well.
Sick. So the next major point that we're going to get into is, why does roommate conflict occur? And the first article we're going to talk about is called Deciding to Dissolve: Individual and Relationship Level Predictors of Roommate Breakup. In this article, they establish 4 dyads before they get into their research. The first dyad is called actor-oriented. So this dyad focuses on self-characteristics and how those characteristics will affect a person's desire to change roommates. So that would be like my personal characteristics and how those would affect if I want to stay with my given roommate or not. The next dyad is partner-oriented. So that just focuses on the other person's characteristics. So characteristics of my roommate, for example, affect my desire to change the roommate. Next dyad is couple-oriented. So that's just a combination of the two. My characteristics and my roommate's characteristics and how those interact. And the last one is similarity-oriented, which focuses on how similar characteristics are between two roommates. So they found that there was mixed support for actor-oriented, the actor-oriented dyad, the couple-oriented dyad, and the similarity-oriented dyad in regards to the desire to split up or stop being roommates. So there was no support for the partner-oriented model, so no support for the dyad that focuses on the other roommate's characteristics.
That's interesting.
Is that like saying like it's not gonna be just about like the characteristics of like your roommate that makes you want to leave?
Yeah, so they also point out that the self characteristics, so like my own characteristics, are most important, but they really drive home the point that it's interdependent. So the combination of, in our case, the combination of our characteristics are most important for when deciding, or most important when influencing the decision to split up as roommates.
Just for clarification, characteristics is the same as personality, correct?
Personality traits, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So I think it was interesting that it's like there's not a whole lot of support for the idea that another person's characteristics are the sole reason or the sole influence on a person's desire to split up. But I think it's very important that this research exists because it's not completely on the self. It's not solely based on your characteristics, and it's not solely based on your roommate's characteristics. They're working together, and that's kind of...
Or against each other.
Yeah. Ideally, within conflict, roommates and people living together should be working together. You know, that's a really important point that I want to make, in that in my conflict class we have made a lot, is that conflict is not solely on one person or the other. It's interdependent. People need to be working together.
Cooperating.
Yeah. In this article, I think it's also important to highlight that sometimes the best solution for roommate conflict is to not live together. Sometimes that's kind of the best option. And that's not a bad thing. And it doesn't have to end in like a negative way. You know, roommate splitting up can be a completely
civil
thing.
I wonder how many people in this research study actually ended up confronting with the conflict to their roommate, I feel like that would have a sway on the significance of the partner oriented. Because if you're not communicating with your roommate, but you have this conflict that you're just not vocalizing, and it's just, oh, it's because of me. I'm feeling all these things because it's not expressed, and there's no opportunity for even trying to find a cooperative solution.
Yeah.
I mean, you're the one that would have because you're the only one here that hasn't had the same roommate twice.
Right. Yeah.
Would you knew that you didn't want to room with your roommate again after last year.
Yes.
Why do you think, do you think it follows these dyads?
Sure. Yeah. I think at the end of the day, we just did not work well with each other. Like, it obviously throughout this podcast, I've just been kind of citing that it was because of cleanliness. But in general, just things wouldn't fit. But that's also probably in part because neither of us really brought up that point that we didn't really fit. You can't force yourself to like people. You can't force yourself to fit in with other people. But I think it can be even more tough to deal with that when you don't even bring that up. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
All right. Moving on. This article is called Human Males. Human males. They're human. Okay?
Okay.
Human males appear more prepared than females to resolve conflict with same-sex peers. So this article just looks at the gender differences when it comes to handling conflict. Yeah.
We have perfect examples of this.
We're all women, by the way.
No, but even our friends that are in Michael's Hall, the 8-person living space on campus.
Yep.
Our group of friends that are all guys, none of them have moved out from the suite. But however, the 2 suites of girls that we know at Michael's, there's 4 left in one of them, and
I don't know. I
think the other one has maybe 6 left. Interesting situation. If you're a freshman, think very carefully about Michael's. I'm sure it works for some people, might not work for all. But moving on to the results of this article, they found that women reported higher intensity anger than men in response to transgressions.
Transgressions, like
conflict?
Yeah.
I could see that, because from my experience with men, they're like, okay, cool, and then that's it. Oh, and then with the, even just as a woman, I can definitely see how a criticism is taken more to heart, especially if you are not close enough, or you don't have that deep of a connection with someone, where the criticism is welcomed in a sense, to a certain degree.
Yeah.
No one enjoys being criticized, but at a certain point in a relationship, it's not so much I'm criticizing you, it's I'm criticizing in action, there's like a disconnect.
Gotcha. Yeah. And?
Well, so I took Lifespan of Human Development with Dr. Lopez, and we were talking about like gender differences with like regarding relationships or same sex, for like friendships that are same sex.
Okay.
Sorry,
we got there.
And I think it was something about women just tend to have more intimate relations than men, and when relationships are more intimate, there's more room for, I think, conflict, because it's like intense.
Gotcha.
Well, like, so what were your feelings about your roommate last year? Were they like ever intense, like really angry?
No. Because she never did anything necessarily that like directly hurt me. Like, she wasn't mean. She was a nice person. It was more just annoyances, I think. But sometimes I tended to just have some strong emotions about it. Just like I said, like going back to how a living space can affect your mental health, like sometimes, after constantly walking into that space that I didn't feel relaxed or comfortable in, that can take a toll a little bit. Zoe knows it did. Because sometimes I get a little angry. Sometimes. Not all the time. I was... Moving on.
Next question.
So I'm going to read out this next bit of results from this study. They also found that men were more likely than women to exhibit a profile of subjective report and physiological response and reaction to a conflict. So reading this, I'm thinking that they found that men were just more like understanding of perspectives, of the different perspectives within the conflicts. And women, on the other hand, were more on a one-track kind of mindset. That's how I interpreted the results. Which, sure, I guess I'm just a woman. I'm just a woman. I don't know.
I'm just a woman on a one-track mind.
I'm just on one track. Life is the highway, and it's just one lane, and I'm on it.
Please help me.
Please help! I'm on one highway, and I can't get off. Please. So, yeah, that's fun. Oh, yeah. Men and women.
They're different.
But
not really.
Okay, last article for this main topic is called Similarity of Interpersonal Needs and Roommate Satisfaction. This is by Karen Erlandson. I also want to just point out that this study involves participants from the Midwest. And funny enough, we're from the Midwest.
This is just a little side note. In Gabby's note doc, it says whoop whoop.
Hey! Okay. We're just trying to have fun.
We're having fun.
We're just having a fun time. So the study looked at 3 different interpersonal needs: inclusion, openness, and control. And if they were trying to look at if roommates had like similarities in like, so if both roommates really valued inclusion, how satisfied would they be? And if they had differing satisfactions in whatever interpersonal need, how would that affect their satisfaction?
What's like inclusion?
So I think what they identified in like the article was inclusion, like being involved,
Like
I guess,
doing
on
things
campus.
together?
Sure.
Like, is it getting dinner together every night, or is it...
I can pull up the article for you, actually, if you guys want to keep talking, please.
Gabby wrote down roommate satisfaction was not affected by their lack of similarity in terms of inclusion or openness. So it looks like personality doesn't really, well, like maybe certain aspects of personality doesn't matter so much.
Sure. Yeah. So
I could see that, because Anne, you're definitely a lot more extroverted than I am, and in the sense of where you go out and do stuff, and like I don't care one way or the other if I do it.
mm-hmm.
That kind of thing. I feel like that's inclusion.
Yeah, so I've got the article pulled up. So inclusion, how they define it, it says that inclusion reflects a person's desire to be included in social groups. So just being involved, being around a lot of people, that sort of thing. Openness reflects a person's desire to experience warm and caring relationships. So I think that would be more focused on building a relationship with that roommate,
instead of just existing in the same space.
Yeah. And then control reflects an individual's desire for power and influence. So those are the interpersonal needs. It's snowing right now. I'm so sorry. Those are the 3 interpersonal needs that they establish. As Anne said, one of the results that they found was that roommate satisfaction was not affected by their lack of similarity in terms of inclusion or openness. However, they found, let me read this. So roommates who both scored low on their need for control were more satisfied with their roommate than those who both scored high on terms of control, or those who scored differently. Which makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's something that I've definitely had to learn, is just, I don't need, like, what's the point in having control over a shared space? Like, it's not just my space.
Yeah.
That's a website.
Oh. Oh, real funny. Funny guy over here. Yeah, no, I think it makes sense for individuals who have a very high sense or have very high need for control, that obviously they're going to be dissatisfied with one another. I think what's also interesting is even when they scored differently, satisfaction was lower. So I'm wondering if that comes from a person with low control being like, this person should have a lower control need. So the last topic that we're going to get into for this podcast is managing conflict. The first article that I have identified is an article we talked about before. It's called Managing Conflict in Shared Housing for Young Adults. I have one bullet point written down for this one, but I think it's extremely important. So they identify 2 ways that college or people living in shared housing, like 2 ways that they handle conflict, 2 of the more popular ways. One of them is communal meetings to openly discuss the conflict, obviously a given. And the second one is avoidance.
Ooh.
So while conflict avoidance may be regarded as a negative coping strategy, it can serve as an important stress reduction function. I think this is really important to talk about. So avoidance, Something I learned in my class is that while obviously like the conflict strategy that people strive for is collaboration. So I mean, it's talking things out, working together. But sometimes what I've learned is that sometimes in the moment, that's not the best thing to do. Like if a conflict is like just happened, or it's a conflict that is really just emotionally heavy for you, sometimes the best strategy that you can go with is avoidance.
Well, you're feeling a lot of big emotions or raw emotions.
It's fresh.
It's fresh, and that might bleed into something that you don't really mean to say.
Right. I think the word avoidance sounds kind of scary, and it can be if you let it get out of hand. Obviously, if you do decide to kind of take some time away, that can kind of spiral into just not addressing the conflict at all, which isn't good. But what I've learned is that avoidance, like this article says, can be a really good thing to help kind of reduce those strong emotions, kind of clear your head a little bit. And then you can kind of work into collaborating and talking things out. But like you said, if you try to go into it when you have these big boy emotions, then it might not work as well as you want it to. So, I know that was I just have one bullet point, but I think that's important. And that's something that people listening should take note of. It's okay to take some time for yourself in conflict. It's okay to kind of take a step back, whether it's from that conflict or that person. It's just, work through your emotions. I think that's super important. So the next article is an article that we've talked about before. It's called Responding to Roommate Troubles, Reconsidering Informal Dyadic Control. It's by Robert M. Emerson. So they kind of talk about, obviously, ways in which college students go about handling their conflict. This first bullet point that I have is talking about the third party within a conflict. So someone that is not within the conflict between two or possibly more individuals. But there's someone that an individual within conflict goes to. And what they identified is that college students would rather go to informal third parties. That's friends, romantic partners, possibly family. They'd rather go to them than formal third parties, and that would be RAs, college officials, area coordinators, those kind of people.
I'd rather go complain to my friend about Zoe than going to my RA.
Yeah. Because I feel like when you're going to just go talk with your friend, you're just looking to vent off those big, heavy emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And because it might not even be that you're upset about a certain issue. It could be that a bunch of stuff is building up to that, and all of a sudden, like, you're at a tipping point, and you just need to get that out. And then once you are able to express it, you're like, wow, that was stupid. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like between that, you don't really go to your RA because your RA is really unbiased. Well, I mean, they're supposed to be.
Yeah.
So
Sure, yeah.
But when you go to your friend, it's kind of like they are biased. I
You're
mean,
looking for assurance.
You're looking for assurance. You're looking for validation about these feelings, and sometimes that's what you get.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And with that, it can kind of seem like formal third parties are the way to go for handling roommate conflict. That's kind of intimidating.
It's a long process, too.
And something else that this article identifies is that people in college, or college kids, don't really want to deal with leaving the dorm situation. They don't want to deal with having to split up and find another space to live. Because, you know, like, you have to go through that whole process of
You have to
finding another
move
place to
everything.
go.
Yeah, that's a hassle.
Does who goes and who stays, you know? That's another thing. And it's, you know, going to RA or another college official might, you know,
It starts that process.
it starts that process, and maybe that's not even a process you wanted to get into.
You know, I know somebody that had a roommate where she just left, didn't say a word until the
Oh.
day she moved out. And then the other roommate was like, well, that was odd. That was really out of nowhere. That surprised me. Like, I didn't talk about it.
Yeah. That's another way to go too. You just don't talk to anybody. You just go.
On your own, baby.
You go off the grid.
Alaska.
Go to Alaska. Yeah, if you don't want to live with your roommate anymore,
Go to Alaska.
go to Alaska. There's no roommates there.
Only mosquitoes.
And
Bears.
Ice and bears. Okay, so let's move on to the next article. This article is called Personality, Reciprocity, and the Strength of Conflict Resolution Strategy. So this really fun article looks at the 4 conflict resolution strategies and their relationship to the big 5. So like the big 5 personality traits. And just kind of looks at their association with each other. So before getting to the results, let's establish the 4 conflict resolution strategies. First one, competing/dominating. That's a selfish thing. It's like you want to solve your own issues and don't really care about the other person's issues. Accommodating or obliging. That's neglecting what you want and making sure the other person is completely satisfied. Collaborating, which we talked about a little bit before, is trying to establish a win-win solution between the two of you. And then avoiding, which we also talked about, is just stepping back from the conflict and letting things happen as they go.
Do you want to explain like what the big 5 is before getting into the meat of it?
I do, Anne, and funny enough, I have notes about that. So, real quick, just the big 5. Agreeableness. That's characterized by warmth, generosity, trust, and cooperation. Next one, extroversion. Sociable, assertive, positive, emotionally. Neuroticism. Emotionally unstable, easily embarrassed, and depressed. That's what the article said. We're just going to roll with it. Conscientiousness is the next one. That is disciplined and responsible. And last one is openness. That's characterized by adventurous, thoughtful, imaginative, and original. So the results for this study, there's a lot. There's a lot, and I don't want to talk about all of them.
Why not?
I want to talk about the 2 ones that were really interesting and were inconsistent with what they hypothesized.
Blow my mind.
So they found that neuroticism is positively associated with collaboration.
Oh.
So neuroticism, it's like emotionally unstable, easily embarrassed, depressed, is positively associated with collaboration. I know the article kind of identified, why that may be, but I was kind of interested to see if you guys had any theories as to why that may be the case.
So, people who are more neurotic, they're not really the mellow type, they're not mild,
They're unstable.
They're unstable, high in emotion, but they prefer, this is what they prefer or what they do?
There is a positive correlation with collaboration.
Like, that they
Yeah,
prefer
they're more likely
collaboration?
to engage in collaboration.
Okay.
Could it be because their big 5 personality trait is being emotionally unstable, and like the ability to be able to collaborate to then create something positive that's both a win-win situation for both parties. It's feeding out of their neuroticism and not into it. So it's kind of creating it's security, it's stability, it's cooperation and working together and stuff like that.
I have a guess what it might be. People who are high in emotion, I'm guessing, like, okay, think about this. If I see you upset, you're crying, or you look stressed, or you look up, there's something noticeable about you. Okay, yeah, let's just say you're crying.
Okay.
And
I'm crying.
Let's just say that you're crying.
I'm crying.
And your roommate asks you, "Oh my God, what's wrong? Like, are you okay?" And you're like, "No, I'm really not. I'm having roommate conflict." And maybe that's the reason. I don't know. I'm just guessing.
Like they're more willing, because they showed their emotions more on their sleeve, kind of.
Yeah.
That the other roommate will already then be dropped down to that like level of intensity, where it's not so much like, wow, you're attacking me. It's, whoa, this is affecting you in a way that I didn't realize it was.
Yeah.
Let's work through this so that we're both better. I like that a lot.
Yeah, I think that's good. And, there's a number of explanations
Did they say?
as to why they do. So while you guys were talking, I was looking it up. So they basically say that while with neuroticism, it's like super unstable, their execution of collaboration is also unstable. So they basically say that within collaboration, you're taking into account both your personal needs and the needs of others. They're saying that with neuroticism, while the conflict process is happening, the emphasis on your personal goals and the other person goals changes, fluctuates. So at one point in the conflict, your personal goals may matter more than the other roommate's goals. But then all of a sudden, in the middle of conflict, that could switch.
So you're like constantly in this ebb and flow of moving from like competitive to accommodating.
Sure,
kind of, and then it just kind of equilibrates.
Yeah,
at collaborating.
Sure. Ideally with collaboration, it's like an equal level of care about both goals of the self and of the other person. But with neuroticism, they're saying that it just fluctuates. Like one goal matters more than the other, then boop, it switches, and then it switches again, and it's just so it's not a good execution of collaboration, but it's collaboration.
But it gets there. It gets the job done.
It gets the point.
Back to my example of Zoe crying.
Back to Zoe crying for a second.
You really want me to cry right now?
Well, no, I don't. But part I think it's what am I trying to say?
Empathy?
It's like I see you crying and I'm like, oh my God, I freak out.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, screw whatever personal goals I have. I want Zoe to have her personal goals like prioritized because we need to figure this out. And she also may be feeling like I'm the one crying right now. My goals are my personal goals are higher than anything right now than my other roommate, which is me, the other roommate.
but then you see that I'm crying and you respond in tow, and then all of a sudden I'm like, man, now I'm making her throw her goals out of the way, and then it shifts.
Yep.
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Good job.
Wow.
The next big result from this study, and I want you guys to kind of go through the same thing that you did for neuroticism. Openness was negatively associated with collaboration. So people who are more adventurous, imaginative, original is negatively associated with the strategy of collaboration. I want you guys to talk about what you may think that means, and then I want to bring up what the researchers thought.
So when I think of openness, I think of artists. Like artists. And especially I have never met an artist who takes critiques well. And I talk about this with my artist significant other quite a lot.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about it last night. And like, it's because it's a part of them in whatever creative thing they make. And they make it, and they're seeing it with the intent of how they want other people to see it, regardless of how that intent actually is. So like say someone drew my arm, but then they showed me the photo and was like, and I was like, whoa, my hand is way too big. And they're like, no, it's not. No, it's not. And I'm like, I know my hand. This isn't what my hand's supposed to look like. But then they're like, no. It's when you're part of the creative process, it's more like you get kind of like blinders onto, this is how I want it to be seen, or I want to be presented, or this is how I feel.
Mm-hmm.
If you're telling me I'm wrong, it's not only an attack on what I'm feeling, it's an attack on me.
Gotcha. Do you have anything to add?
Well, so openness to new ideas, openness to, I'm not sure with this one.
Yeah. Okay. So I can quickly read what the researchers thought.
Yeah, what did they have to say?
So they said that with openness, another component of it is being independent. So with that may come less consideration for the other person, because it's kind of like what you were saying a bit. You're a little bit more independent. You're a little bit more just kind of in your own space, not really thinking about the other person and how they might be feeling. But that's just also a theory that they came up with. They were like really confused by it. Like in the article, they were like, we don't really know. This might be it, but we're not entirely sure.
Going kind of off of what you said, I just read about in my interpersonal communications class that
shout out Dr. Antos! We both have her as professors.
Great. And it was talking about how if interdependence, which is like relying on someone, isn't in a relationship, which like kind of goes off of the independence. Like if someone views themselves as completely independent of another person, then there is no interdependence. Mm-hmm. And then there's no need for conflict, because they'll just brush it off being like, well, this person I'm not going to be depending on this person. So even if I am upset about something, why bring it up? It will only hinder a relationship in their mind, because they're not dependent on that person.
You're not going to start beef with, somebody that you could really care less about.
Exactly. Yeah. Why start drama just to start drama?
Right. So the last article that we're going to get into is called Moving On or Digging Deeper, Regulatory Mode and Interpersonal Conflict Resolution. It's by Christine E. Webb. This article, initially, it was kind of hard for me to read, but as soon as I kind of got into it, it's like my favorite article out of all of these that we've gone over. So,
do you save the best for last?
I saved the best for last. So first, they identify a term called locomotion. locomotion basically means that, or locomotion is a desire to change from one state to another. So it's a motivation to make change and make a resolution within a conflict. It's a desire for things to, like, hey, let's change this, switch this up, let's do something different. I also wanted to point out that when I was reading this and I read locomotion, there was like a memory that was scratched at the back of my little head, and I couldn't remember for the life of me until yesterday. Locomotion is also the name of a carnival ride that I went on like when I was maybe like 6 or 7, and I remember going on it like 10 times repeatedly.
That's interesting.
Wow.
I think of the song.
Huh.
I'll play it for you. Not right now. But
Okay.
later.
Later. Maybe later. I like looked it up, and I think you can like buy them. Like the locomotion like ride.
The ride.
Have you it's
Please
like
don't buy a ride.
it's the one that it just like goes in like a circle, but it has like a couple like little hills, and it just goes like super fast.
Oh,
Like in a circle.
There were versions of that where it was like there was a caterpillar, a dragon.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I think that might.
Yeah.
I remember going on this one. It was called Locomotion. So a fun little tie-in. Moving on.
Relatable anecdote, Gabby.
Relatable anecdote. Let's bring it back to conflict. You know what? I'm sure my parents, who went on it with me like 10 times,
wanted to have some conflict.
wanted to have some They wanted to bring it up, but didn't.
Avoidance.
Avoidance. Avoidance for my sake. Me at 7 years old, just like, I want to go in it again.
Okay.
So locomotion, wanting to create change within the conflict. They also identify assessment mode, which is essentially just the opposite. They just want to, they think people who are in assessment mode think that as long as they just address that there is a conflict, then that's enough. They don't really see the need for change necessarily. So the results of this study found, it was with college roommates. They found that roommates with a stronger locomotion reported that their conflicts were more resolved, and they were also less negative. So both of these individuals had a desire to create change within the conflict. They also identified that when conflict discussions between roommates were based, or when roommates had the were in the locomotion mode, their conversations were over 2 minutes shorter than conversations between roommates who are in the assessment mode. So conversations were shorter.
That's interesting.
I thought that was really, yeah.
Do you think it's because the people that are in the assessment mode just keep circling back around the same things and just trying to say it in a different way, but they're not in the right mindset, or like willingness to go into the locomotive mode?
Yeah. I think so. That was good.
Thank you.
Yeah, obviously it's... Anne, did you want to say something?
Oh, I think Zoe got it right where she said that they just keep circling back and nothing really like resolves. It's like it ends like, okay.
It's not enough to just address it. It's not enough just to verbally say that conflict is happening.
Conflict's happening right now.
What?
Whoa.
Hey, is there? Really? Do we need to talk about it right now?
No, we can just address it.
We can
We'll
just address it.
it.
It hasn't even been addressed. I don't know what mode we're in right now.
We just addressed it.
We're in friend mode.
Friend mode. Okay. So those are all of the articles and results that I have. So we can conclude this podcast before that, I just wanted to see if you guys had any opinions, any advice for, incoming freshmen or people who are currently dealing with roommate conflict. Any fun little anecdotes about our time as roommates, or just closing remarks?
So I think the reason why Zoe and I worked out so well, you kind of expect rooming with your friend, it's gonna end in a disaster. It's not gonna.
I thought so.
Yeah, I thought so too, and that's why I'm not rooming with you. And but I think it was we didn't have that expectation that things were going to be perfect. We had that nervous expectation that things were gonna go downhill pretty fast.
That we would not be friends after freshman year.
And I think going with the expectation that things are gonna be perfect will end in disaster for you.
Major disaster.
Yeah. Because it's, you set up these expectations for yourself and then you disappoint yourself when that expectation isn't met.
You don't have to be best friends with your roommate.
You don't.
You don't have to be at all.
And just don't be afraid to have a meaningful conversation, even if you aren't best friends with your roommate.
Yeah.
You still have to share a space with someone. You still have to live with someone.
Mm-hmm.
And regardless of where you are in your friendship or even lack thereof, there still has to be some shared respect between the two of you.
Right. Yeah, the only thing that I would say is, keep your mental health in check. If this space is not benefiting you and, you've talked about it with your roommate and things just aren't working out, there's nothing wrong with leaving that space. There's nothing wrong with going to your RA and talking about it. Don't have to be best friends with your roommate. If worst comes to worst, move to Alaska.
Yeah.
All right. So,
and if your roommate starts playing Pitbull when you and your other roommate are trying to sleep, lock her in the bathroom.
Okay, don't lock her in the bathroom. I don't like it. So that's it for this podcast. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks,
Zoe, and thank you for allowing me to drag you into this, even though you're not in the class. Again, thank you for listening. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.